You know, there's nothing that'll humble you more than having a packed house last week and nobody in here this week. So, I don't know. It's right. That's right. A quality audience is here tonight. That's a good thing. Well, we're glad you're here. I want to kind of finish up. I was really close last week, and I was afraid people were going to start walking out on me. You never want to have that happen. So we ended. We've been talking about David, talking about his Psalms, and just the impact that we see in his heart as he lives his life in the various aspects of his heart for his enemy, his heart when faced and confronted with his sins, his heart during times of victory, his heart when he was told no. And we get to see that unfold, and I really wanted to finish up that tonight and then roll into this next portion. But the question is, what would it take to be a person after God's own heart? If we see how David was and how God interacted with him and how David poured out his feelings and his thoughts on paper or whatever he wrote it on back then, right? What would it take for us to be a person after God's own heart?
You have to be coachable.
Oh, I like that term. Yeah, he's buttering up the teacher. I like it. Come on, bring me more. Let's go. Need to be correctable, perfectible. We talk about there's a pursuit of perfection, and that's Jesus, right? But we're called to be perfectible, to be changed into his likeness, and that's a really good thing. What else? Okay. Got to get those rough edges off a little bit. David had some rough edges, right? And when confronted with those things, he allowed that refiner's fire to polish him and purify him.
Kind of not always together, but courageous as well as humble. That's a hard combination at times. Someone's real courageous, a lot of times they're got a chip on their shoulder and looking down at everybody else, but humility along with courage.
Well, and sometimes it takes courage to live in humility. Like we get afraid that if we show any sort of weakness, that people are going to take advantage of that. But so it's a bold move to be humble because you're setting yourself out there. Okay, I like that.
Gotta have a desire.
Okay.
Because if you don't desire to, you're going to start that journey.
Okay.
You have to have discipline.
Anybody can be disciplined on the first day of a diet, right? But day 2, when you come home and there's a cake coming out of the oven and she just felt like making it, you're like, oh, maybe I'll start my diet tomorrow, right? And sometimes it's that way with discipline. I like that idea. We'll get on that tomorrow. Okay. What else? Pretty short list. I've got a few I'll throw out to you and might get your wheels turning. Seek God first in all matters. That kind of goes with humility. I want to stop and run everything through him. A preacher one time talked about this as being a filter. I run everything through it, and whatever comes out on the other side has got to be pure. It's got to be holy. It's got to be right. It's got to be the way God intended it. So do I seek God in all matters? Allow his way to be the only way. And sometimes we get in a bind there because I am all about it until something in here hits me wrong or cuts me hard, right? And God's word has the power to convict us. But it's like when David was confronted with his sin, he humbled himself to that and became submissive to that, whereas a lot of times we see people bow up to that. And that's that pride and arrogance of building a wall is like, don't tell me what's, wrong with me. Let me tell you what's wrong with you. And we quickly turn that back on somebody, right? Follow God's will with confidence and courage. And there's that other word. To follow God's will with confidence, though, what does that look like? Because we're stepping out in faith, right? Is that a difficult thing?
It's got to be visible.
Okay.
You can't do it at your home by yourself if it's Father.
Okay.
Doesn't take a lot of courage.
Okay. Next is praise God for the results. And it kind of goes back with how are we when we're told no? When we've prayed and prayed and prayed and we've poured our heart out to something and the answer wasn't what we hoped. Can we praise God for the results? And kind of along that line, be able to accept the consequences of sin. David accepted those consequences. He poured his heart out in the meantime, but when God's answer was final, what did he do? Got up and washed himself and went and ate and, moved on. And along with that is take responsibility for our actions. We're all sinful people. We make mistakes. And I think what shows the most about someone's character, what their heart is how they handle things, how they take responsibility for their actions. And that's a big step. Any other thoughts there on having a heart like that? Okay, well, this will kind of go with a little bit of the theme of David. I want to keep it running with him. And tonight I want to talk about really maybe one of the unsung heroes of the Bible. And his friendship is one of the most solid examples we have in Scripture. And most of the time we do get sidetracked talking about David. But he tends to steal the show. He's got a lot of things written down about him. But everybody needs a sidekick, right? And when you think about it, it's really where I want to go for the first part. I want you to create a list of dynamic duos, great sidekicks. What comes to mind? You can go through movies of old. You can go through sports. You can anywhere you want to go. Okay, thanks. We get that one off the list early. I like it. What else? Yeah, Jordan and Pippen. Okay. There we go. Batman and Robin. It's okay. Y'all being shy like, man, I'm not going to say that. Say it. It's okay. I think. Okay, Abbott and Costello. Okay. The Lone Ranger and? Okay. Tom and Jerry, if you want to go that route. Tell you a quick story on that. Our kids were sitting around one time and they were watching some Tom and Jerry, and Ben was like, man, I think Jerry's my favorite. And Hannah, sweet little redhead Hannah, says, you know what? Tommen is my favorite. And she called, she didn't understand Tom and, but it was like, Tommen's my guy. Okay. But, so I had to put that one down there. Lewis and Clark, this expeditionary force, right? Maybe it's husband and wife. Hopefully it's husband and wife, the dynamic duo. You go through life together, arm in arm. Well, for David, it was Jonathan. Those guys were, I would say Jonathan in those early years was huge to David. And so, as human beings, we're created to need company and relationships and to crave those. And if you have one of those relationships that is closer than a brother, I think probably in our world today, we think that's probably fairly rare that we're able to have that. Whether, maybe in college you get a group of buddies, and does that buddy stick with you through thick and thin, no matter whether he's living in California and you're in New York? And a lot of times those happen, it might be my neighbor, Kristen's dad, and one of his best friends. I have two fathers-in-laws, right? And they go through everything together. They travel together. They have knit their lives together, raised kids together. And sometimes timing and placement put those things in action, right? Well, here we get to see what Jonathan is like as a person and what qualities there were about him that made that dynamic duo so dynamic. So I want to look real quick at 1 Samuel 17, the very end of that chapter, starting at verse 57. It says, "And as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, 'Whose son are you, young man?' And David answered, 'I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite.'" And then in chapter 18, it says, "As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt." The NIV says, Jonathan became one spirit with David. This shows that there was some sort of instant connection. And you can probably think of relationships you've had that, man, it was immediate. Like we were destined to be friends for life. And that's really the way this turned out. It shows that it was instant, it was sincere. It wasn't based on status, but on a shared faith and courage. Why do you think Jonathan was drawn to David so quickly? What was it about that character that automatically, really before he knew much about him, this is probably his first real encounter with him. He might have heard about him, of what he had done. But what is it that was so drawn, that they were so drawn to each other?
Imagine Jonathan saw something of David out there on that field that struck a chord with him.
Okay.
He liked what he saw.
He had an intuition about him, an instinct. Maybe he heard what was said and he watched him in action. Maybe he saw him putting on Saul's armor and he's like, man, I don't need this stuff. God is enough. I don't know. What qualities make someone a good friend in your life?
Loyal,
Okay. Dependability. Ooh. Somebody that's willing to shoot you straight. Okay. There has to be a little bit of a relationship there, right? In order for that to happen.
Trustworthy, keep secrets.
Yeah. I think trust is huge in that. Are you dependable? Are you somebody that I can really confide in? There's this covenant of loyalty that happens here with Jonathan. It says he took off his robe and he gave it to David along with his tunic, even his sword, his bow, his belt. Took all this stuff off and gave it to David. What does that mean? What's the symbolism of that?
You can shirt off his back.
Okay.
Probably in that area it created a covenant of some sort. It created a bond that was very visible.
Okay. It was definitely a showing. I mean, who is Jonathan at this point?
He's the next king.
Okay. He's the prince. He's the heir apparent. He's the next king. And he takes off all of that list of things, right? Stripped himself of the robe that was on him, gave it to David, his armor, even his sword, his bow, his belt. He gave up that appearance of who he was, and he bestowed that on David.
Even somewhat at that point, even an act of submitting and recognizing the whole recognition that he submitted himself at the point that he was willing to accept David as what he was going to be.
Okay. It showed an honor, this covenant of loyalty to him. Hey, I'm giving of my status and I'm handing that over to you. He humbled himself before David. He removed his level of status and bestowed that onto David. So you have loyalty and trust and honor. Status is off the table with these guys. And if Jonathan had been a prideful, I'm the next guy, he might have come in and said, all right, well, bow before your prince, O great warrior, and pay homage to me. And in a lot of societies, especially during that time and really throughout any type of kingdom, you come in to the king's court or in their presence, and what do? You bow. You're saying, hey, you're the big dog. I am a loyal subject to you. And here Jonathan is the guy in kind of a power position, and it's going the other direction.
Jason, it's mindset of Christ. He says that he looks to the interest of others more significant than himself.
Yeah.
I think he saw the part of David in his honesty and his integrity and the way he carried himself. That's who I like. That's who I would be looking at David as a shepherd boy, but he saw that in him.
Yeah.
He showed that significance by what's mine is yours.
And what does that tell us? What does that reveal about the character of Jonathan?
He was all in.
Mm-hmm. He was a humble servant, really, of who? He's serving God. He's got to understand, after watching all this unfold, that God is with this man. But we see the character of Jonathan not as a prideful character, but it's etched in humility. Okay? Another thing this friendship a quality within this friendship is the quality of protection. If you look over to chapter 19, the priority is to glorify God, even if that means defying the king. It says, and Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself, and I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I'll tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David and reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. So he defended him, he protected him, he stood up to his dad, who happens to also be the king. Man. Why is this a risky thing for Jonathan? What's the risk involved for him?
His father might feel like he's being a traitor and unfaithful to him,
Okay.
and he could as easily feel him as look twice at him.
Exactly. Can standing up for a friend be costly? Can it come with some consequences? But Jonathan was willing to take that. Can it be rewarding? Where's the reward in this for Jonathan?
Self-reward for doing the right thing.
Okay. He's doing right. David's done nothing wrong. Their souls have been knit together. He's willing to die for him, to fight for him, to stand up even against his father and the wishes that his father has. But he uses some reason with him about who David is, but about God as well. Like, hey, we don't want to sin. He's done these great things. The Lord is working through him. Think this through, Dad. This is not somewhere you want to go. Saul was jealous of David. Maybe the attention that he got after he killed him. You think about the song, Saul's killed his thousands, David's killed his tens of thousands, right? The party's happening in David's honor, and Saul has had enough of that. He's also got to think about his throne and that lineage of Jonathan is the next guy up. So he's motivated really through some prideful and selfish reasons. And Jonathan is able to talk him out of that. Think about what Jonathan's giving up here. He's got to know, right? Man. Jonathan has given up a chance to enjoy being the king, to have his own kingdom. What parent doesn't want to see their kid succeed, right? What's Saul wanting for Jonathan? To be the next king. But man, murder for that to happen? Is that even really a realistic scenario? Well, I ran across something I'm going to share with you. There's one other instance. It was in Texas, 1991. I was a senior in high school. I don't remember this, but it must have not come out in the Hereford brand. I don't know. A mother was sentenced to prison for an attempted murder for hire of another mom on her daughter's cheerleading squad, because it was a competition, and she was afraid, pretty sure, this other girl was going to beat out her daughter. And so she goes and arranges. She wasn't going to kill the girl. She was just going to kill the girl's mother, because that would probably wreck her, right? Well, she was convicted of trying to eliminate her daughter's competition by killing the girl's mother, just for a spot on a cheerleading team. And so when you put it in that context, Saul wanting to kill David is really not that big of a deal, right? I mean, it's not like he's trying out for cheerleader. But what gets us to that point? Pride and arrogance and not walking with God, right? And so Jonathan is going to be able to talk him down off that ladder initially. Over in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 31, we see it again. For as long as the son Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul hurled a spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had disgraced him. We're talking about what's the risk, right? Jonathan is not backing away from this. And it's gotten dangerous on his part as well. And that leads us to another part of this friendship, is sacrificial love. In 1 Samuel 23, verses 15 through 17, David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of my father Saul shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul, my father, also knows this. Jonathan accepted God's plan for David's kingship, even though it cost him his own royal future. That's sacrificial love. That's Jonathan, who's been in that household groomed to be the next man up. He's given up everything out of love for a friend and out of obedience to God. And I think that's the key. When you look back on what knit their souls together, Jonathan looks like a man after God's own heart too, doesn't he? He had to make a decision between earthly status and following God. And when you boil it down like that, kind of all decisions come to that, right? If I want to be a man after God's own heart, it comes down to that. Am I going to seek earthly gain, earthly status, things, and follow pride, or am I going to submit to following God? David had somebody he could trust to his core. And you think about that. When you're on the run, the king is in for you, and you're best friends with the king's son. Now how big is trust? That one kind of goes to all caps, right? Maybe to the front of the line. If he was wrong in trusting Jonathan, David's going to be killed. He's walked right into the trap. Hey, be friends with him, pretend everything's okay, get him in here, we'll take him out, it's back to you again. Would we have made the same decision as Jonathan? If we go back in time and we read through all that, whew, would we have wrestled with that internally? What are some things that make this decision hard as we go to real life here? Our life. Or you can go to Jonathan's. What are things that make that decision hard for Jonathan? Or was it hard?
Yeah, I don't think it was that hard for Jonathan, because I think Jonathan accepted what God had planned.
Okay.
And Saul, even when Saul tried to do it, he really wasn't concerned about Jonathan. Saul was concerned about Saul.
Okay.
He was trying to get Jonathan.
Using that as a bait to get Jonathan in? Okay.
To turn Jonathan against David, but Jonathan didn't take that bait
Okay.
because of his relationship with David, and I think his faith in what God's plan was. And even here, he's like, I'm willing to be number two. I'm willing to be. He tells David, I'm willing. That's okay. I don't perceive any jealousy there. Saul tried to make him jealous, and it didn't work. Saul's to me, as this story plays out, all Saul was concerned about was Saul.
He was trying to manipulate the situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are people today, maybe in your circle, that may try to do the same thing. And whether we trusted them or not trusted them, it causes us sometimes to keep our antennas up, because maybe we aren't willing to fully trust somebody's motive or whatever. And so that builds over time. I think, like you said, it's a relationship that builds over time, and so then that trust is there, and so you don't question it after a while, because that person's giving you no reason to doubt him. And Jonathan had given David no reason to doubt him, because they had that relationship that was lifelong.
Yeah. Quote came to mind, and I use it with my team sometimes. It's amazing what can be accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit. And when you think about that and you let that soak into the friendship level, I want Jordan to be celebrated, right? Says Pippen. And Jordan's okay when Pippen is celebrated. There's no animosity, there's no envy, there's no jealousy. There's no strife between them, because the credit isn't going to either one of them anyway. It's going to God. And when you don't care if you get the credit, what do you have to lose? Nothing. And you support and you encourage and you lift up. But so many times, and in this world, we're taught that second fiddle is a bad spot. If you're not first, you're last. Right? Dog eat dog. So I want to move to their last meeting. It's over in 1 Samuel 20, verses 41 and 42. As soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever." And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. What stands out to you about this farewell? It says David fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. What kind of honor and tribute is he paying to Jonathan?
As if he is the prince.
Exactly. He is giving him all the honor and tribute that he deserves because that's the status that he currently has, right? And he honors that. It's a sign of submission and respect. It says, David weeping the most. Why would he be weeping the most, you think? Yeah. And Jonathan's basically telling him, like, there's nothing I can do at this point, but I'm telling you, I can't talk my father out of this. Right? That's what the arrows were about when he shot him. He's coming for you, and I can't change that. Good luck. I'm pulling for you. We're not going to be able to be together. We're at this way of parting. And where the story ends, they probably both know. Jonathan's got to know that this isn't going to end well. God is with David. And I know this. He is the anointed. And he knows that in some way, shape, form, or fashion, this is going to play out where David's going to be the next king. Not in a poor Jonathan deal, but I think he looks at his dad with pity, like, this is what a defiance before God looks like in my father. And David weeping the most, he's sitting there thinking, this is my best friend on the planet. And I hurt for him. And they have this covenant. The Lord shall be between me and you and between my offspring and your offspring forever. And we see that later on with Mephibosheth. However you say that, right? That he brings him in. And we talked about that a week or so ago, I think, in Sunday morning about that. And what a great story. But they submit to one another. David recognizes Jonathan as the prince and heir to the throne that he was, while Jonathan recognizes David as God's elect to be the next king. And they both know that something's got to give, right? So David's grief over in 2 Samuel 1:26. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman. There is a deepness in connectivity when you have a brotherhood that's that tight. It's different than the love of a woman. It's just different. When I was coaching in Throckmorton, I was an assistant on the football team, and the very first state championship we won, they weren't supposed to. The best team supposedly in Throckmorton history had graduated the year before without winning it. These guys came together. That's what they call themselves, band of brothers. They weren't the most skilled, but man, you could not shake them. You couldn't break them. They were together, arm in arm, and they went through the entire season that way. There is a brotherhood there that cannot be broken once it's knitted together. And so when David learns that Saul and Jonathan have died, he pours out this lament for Saul as well. but you just see his heart breaking for that friendship in Jonathan. And that lament shows us the emotional honesty and just the realness of that relationship and what that friendship was, to have something so strong and so deep. What was that friendship based on? What's at the center of it? It's God, right? They both in willful submission to God. He's the one they're following. God is leading him through this. And when you have a friendship or a relationship in your dynamic duo, husband and wife, we talk about that God is the centerpiece of that relationship, right? And that if both factions are focused on God and serving God as they serve each other, you can get through anything. So there's a few things to draw out of this relationship. We spent a lot of time kind of talking about the story and a little bit of the backstory. David's reactions through this. And you look at the initial meeting and reaction. Jonathan has said, I'm here for you. Our souls are knitted together. We see David, these two friends crying together at that last meeting. We see this lament that happens after Jonathan passes. It's emotional. And a lot of times we talk about, guys don't show any emotion. Be tough. That's what a man looks like. Well, a man of God here has cried how many times tonight? That's courageous, isn't it? To be able to pour out your heart like that before a friend. He realizes what Jonathan's given up for him. He realizes the trust and the true friendship that he had in him. It could be nothing more stirring than that, right? And so we see trust maybe as that biggest quality. The truest of friends, one that denies themselves and puts the other first, with God at the center. When you think about Jonathan, I've got nothing but respect for the way this reads. And that's a call to each one of us to be that type of friend to somebody. He's not the only example in the Bible of denying himself the temptations of life. Jesus really had this to say in Matthew 16:24 and following. Says, Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? And I think that so seamlessly ties in this relationship is what that relationship looks like with Jesus on the cross for each one of us. We sing that song, What a Friend We Have in Jesus, right? There can be no truer example. And each one of our relationships should really be modeled after that. And sometimes we choose not to trust because we've had trust broken somewhere. But that's really not what we're called to do. We're called to trust, be that type of friend. We're out of time. We'll pick up here again next week and kind of finish through this story and then see where that leads us. I do want to close this in prayer, and then the evening will be yours. Father, I'm just thankful for your word, for the lessons we learn about friendship, about love, trust. Lord, I'm thankful for your son, Jesus, that was willing to give up his life for each one of us. And if we'll just trust in him and follow in his footsteps, that we get an opportunity to be with you for all eternity, and I can't think of anything better than that. Lord, I just pray that as we evaluate our friendships, that we'll look within ourselves to see how we can be a better friend to the people in our lives, that we can be that Jonathan, that we can create that dynamic duo. I pray for that within our marriages as well, that we'll truly put you first in all things as we serve one another. Lord, I'm thankful for the example that we have of this great friendship, and I'm thankful for your son, Jesus, and for all that he did for us on the cross, and we just pray these things in his name. Amen. All right, thank you for your time tonight.